So this video is a little bit different from my norm because I've been vlogging for the last year off and on, and I've got some old ASMR videos. I have all sorts of various kinds of videos going on. What I'm doing in this video is kind of introducing a couple of things. First, I'm introducing the idea of ritual theory and a series of videos that are going to be coming out each Friday for the foreseeable future, at least a year. I've been making a series of videos on my Patreon around ritual design that are based on the tarot cards. So if you don't want to wait per week for these videos, you can always check out my Patreon. There's 6 months of these already in there and available to all paid subscribers. However, I'm also teaching a class this January on ritual theory. So if you're interested in this and would like to have some input and some class time around your own ritual design and ritual theory, then check that out in the description box below. I'm very excited about offering that, and I'm interested to see how you're thinking about rituals and what you're going to be doing with your own rituals. So what I want to do is in this video kind of introduce the concepts behind the ideas that I'm sharing in those ritual videos that are tied to the tarot cards. There will be another one about the tarot specifically and how to think about it and understand it, but this is around ritual theory writ large, right? My PhD is in mythological studies and depth psychology, and the whole concept of depth psychology is the communion and communication with the unconscious. So lots of dream work, myth and symbol, fairy tale, that kind of stuff. One of the ways that we can communicate directly with our own unconscious is through ritual. And so I find it a very powerful tool, and a tool that is gaining in popularity through like witchy circles and like witch talk and that kind of thing. But it doesn't have to be witchy per se. In fact, it doesn't have to be tied to a religion at all, or it could be tied to your particular religion and not to some sort of pagan deity. It is very much a tool, and it is a tool that we have as humans to speak with our unconscious. Now, there are a lot of things about our unconscious that makes it one of the most powerful parts of who we are. It's always listening to the things that we say, and it's always creating new parts of our reality on our behalf. So if we're talking about the unconscious, we're also talking about the higher self with capital H and capital S. We're also possibly even talking about like the divine, because our unconscious can be the seat of the divine if you follow in Jungian terms. And if you see there's a whole shelf of Jung behind me, that's kind of where I'm going with this. So the thing about rituals is that your unconscious doesn't know the difference between doing something in a ritual form versus doing something in real life. So if you want to do something that is big and scary or hard or otherwise monumental, and you want to teach your unconscious from the bottom up that this is a thing you are bringing into your life, this is a thing you are generating, then by performing some sort of ritual task, what you can do is kind of pull that energy into your unconscious, and your unconscious is like, yep, we've already done it. My favorite example is if you want to take a leap of faith, you should jump off of a 4-inch curb. It seems kind of silly, but your body doing the thing and setting the mindset prior to doing the thing, and then showing your unconscious that you can do the thing and you can stick the landing, then a larger leap of faith or a more spiritual leap of faith is going to be a lot easier because you've done this little tiny ritual version of it. So one of the things that you can do with rituals is kind of create the things that you want to create in your life, which is a lot of what we do all the time with rituals in various ways. One of the really important parts of the study of ritual was done by Van Gennep, and the whole idea is that it is a time of liminality, right? Rituals are spaces that are liminal, meaning that they're between. And there's like an entire book called Betwixt and Between. But they're thresholds. They're between one state and the next. So if we think about kind of the rituals that still survive in our society today, those are the kinds of rituals we're talking about. You go from a single state to a married state. You are christened, or you're born, or you die. Like there's these like transitions from one space to another. We're lacking a lot of those transitions that are adolescent and moving into adulthood, or those transitions like I just went through menopause, those transitions from middle adulthood into later adulthood. We're missing a lot of those, and we long for them. And so sometimes we need to create them ourselves when we're going through these transitions and transformations. The thing is that liminality is scary. It's uncomfortable. The whole point of liminality is to get through it, to get out the other side. Think about like airports. Right? Airports are very liminal spaces. We don't want to hang out in airports any longer than we have to. No one's ever said as beautiful as an airport. You want to get the heck out of it. And I also think about Frank Lloyd Wright and how he would make all of the liminal spaces, the thresholds at the doors, really low ceilings so that you scoot on through as fast as you can. And the whole reason there is that we want to just kind of get out of liminality as quickly as we can. And what rituals have been for eons been designed to do is to help shepherd us safely through that threshold. It's to get us through that transformation from one state of being to another as safely as possible. So the whole idea there is to be able to like kind of get through the liminality of some sort of transformation or change in our lives. And this is where having some sort of ritual or ritual design can be incredibly powerful. From a historical perspective, we have a lot of anthropological as well as religious information around rituals. Generally speaking, we know that it meets sociological needs in terms of keeping a society built together, having a society that has some cohesion, some sense of community, as well as some psychological needs where you're helping a person to mentally get through a tricky transformational time. So, you know, an adolescent becoming an adult, those kinds of coming of age, that's kind of the classic example of a historical ritual. And those coming of age rituals are also really important in terms of the psychological kind of mental shift of, oh, I need to actually, you know, take more responsibility or something like that. It actually helps with that conversion from one state to another. The other thing that I really want to cover before we get into what rituals are specifically is the fact that it's incredibly important, and one of the most powerful things that you have as a conscious being working with your conscious, not your unconscious, is your will and your intention. So when you are creating a ritual, what your intention is behind it is incredibly important. And we hear about intention setting all the time. I set intentions every morning. We do these kinds of things pretty much a lot in this day and age. However, when we're talking about a ritual, we want to get very, very clear, like almost spiritual legalese about our intentions. We want to be very clear about what it is that we're creating and what it is we're trying to do. And we need to focus on that prior to designing the ritual because it can help us with figuring out the elements of the ritual that we want to pull together. So rituals are essentially an action. It's a physical embodied action that you can do in the world. So many of the videos that you're going to see me doing with these tarot cards are a little silly because I'm physically doing something on the video. And so often you want to think about it as a doing, an action, a verb. So when you're thinking about what your ritual looks like, that's one of the things that you want to think about. Another element of a ritual is that they are sacred. So if you go into Mircea Eliade and the sacred and the profane, essentially the profane is the everyday. It's your kitchen, it's your bathroom, it's your everyday life, right? The sacred is a time that's been set aside just a little bit. It's been set aside for something special. And generally it's set aside for something holy or something religiously assigned or something like that. But it can just be set aside. It can just be like a space that you've created for yourself. One of my favorite ways to set a space for a ritual is just lighting a tea light or lighting a candle. It doesn't have to be like a whole big, like huge rigmarole. You can literally just light a candle and kind of go set that intention with your will and be like, this is my sacred space now. I'm going to be holding this space for as long as this tea light is lit. That kind of thing is really useful for setting that stage of that sacred and kind of set apart intentional element. Some of the things about rituals is that they're usually tied to culture, and they're usually tied to some sort of calling on the gods or calling on myth or religion of some sort. And if you've got somebody that you believe in, great, go for it, do it. This is the time when you say a little prayer. This is the time when you have lit your candle and you're going to say a little prayer and express your intention in that prayer. However, the thing is that it doesn't have to be a god. It doesn't have to be anything. However, your unconscious does kind of understand the appeal to a higher power. So if you are an atheist, perhaps, you might think about calling on the wind or nature or your own higher self or your own inner nature or even just your own unconscious. It doesn't have to be super, prayerful or methodical. But this is the point at which we do have some sort of connection with our religion. And this is how rituals within religion work. So if you have some sort of divine that you interact with, then this is the time to pray to that divine being for support and for helping with your ritual. Often rituals do involve other people. They are often a communal event. So if you have other people that you can do these things with, that's wonderful. I don't often have other people. I live on the dead end of a dirt road by myself. And so usually I don't get that opportunity to do rituals with somebody else. However, that's an optional element as well. The other last piece is that these have to be in the context of yourself and your own culture. So generally speaking, rituals cannot be like picked up out of one culture and plopped into another. That's why like wedding vows going from one culture to the other can seem really different. And you probably shouldn't appropriate somebody else's culture in that case. So what I'm saying is that you probably need to home grow this and do this from scratch. Unless you have a culture and a tradition that helps inform it. You don't really want to go outside of your own culture for this information. This is some of that cultural appropriation stuff. Also, it can be very harmful if it is a closed practice that you're kind of tapping into. So just kind of be aware of that it is culturally specific, it is contextual to you, and it should be very personal. So the idea behind my tarot series is simply to show you how to do this with a set of symbols that exist, right? There are a lot of people who are very familiar with the tarot, who understand what the cards mean, who might already do their own readings or watch other readers do readings. And the idea is that I wanted to put together low-cost, simple rituals that were not going to require a whole bunch of tools, that were based on symbols and metaphors that are pretty familiar to a lot of people. It's also just an easy way of organizing them for myself. It gives me 78 ideas for rituals. And it's something that I actually already do for myself. If I'm pulling a card or I'm trying to draw a card toward me, I've designed a lot of these rituals and done them for myself months ago. So that's one of the elements of why I'm doing this series. So you can use any metaphor. It doesn't have to be tarot. I'm going to explain why I'm using the tarot in the next video. But the thing is that any metaphor is going to work. It can just be the metaphor of the language, leap of faith and jumping off of something. It can also be a fairy tale or a myth. It could be a poem. It doesn't have to be any sort of specific set of images. It could actually be something based on a dream that you had. There's lots of different ways to have that conversation with the unconscious, and it isn't necessarily going to have to be something that's tied to a specific set of images of any sort. So this can apply to things that are like the witchier side of things, as neo-pagan folks are trying to design their own rituals and figure things out. This can be very useful for them. But it also doesn't have to be at all. It can just be something that you're doing for yourself. It can take 5 minutes. We don't have to like make a whole big show out of this. If that's what you want to do, go for it. That's up to you. What I'm saying is essentially we can just kind of make these pretty easy and straightforward and still see some of their effects in our lives. So at this point, I'm going to end the YouTube video, and you can find the introduction to the tarot series in the next video. However, I do have an entire second half of this video that's going to be over on my Patreon, and I'm going to link to that in the description below if you want to join us there.